All right, everyone, we're back. Episode 5. I'm already at 5 episodes already for Under the Scope podcast. Today, we're joined by a senior chemical engineering major, Marisa Comroe. What's going on, Marisa? How you doing?
Good, Aiden. How are you?
Dude, living the dream.
I know.
It's first week in November. It's crazy.
Beautiful outside. Love it.
I think it's a bit chilly out, but that's what I also don't like. I don't like how it gets dark so quickly. I was never a fan of that about wintertime.
No, I kind of agree. But last week when it was like super dark getting up, I didn't like that. So I would rather get up with the sun.
No,
that was rough.
No, that's cool. But yeah, we'll go ahead. We'll hop right into it. So Marisa is actually a transfer student into Widener. So do you want to take us through like where you were before and then why you decided to go ahead and pursue chemical engineering here at Widener University?
Yeah, it's kind of a long story. So I graduate. All right, good. I graduated high school in 2014, and I actually went right to Drexel. I stayed there for a semester. I did not enjoy it. It was not my cup of tea. And I'm not afraid to say it either.
Okay.
I did chemical engineering, and it just, I don't know, like I couldn't get into it. I don't know what it was, was the vibes that Drexel gave off, but it was miserable. So I left after a semester. And I was upset because I was like, I don't know, like, do I not want to be an engineer? Like, is that what this is? So I ended up going to Delaware County for a little bit, trying to find myself. Took some art classes, took a lot. And then I ended up like coming back to engineering and finally like declaring a major in engineering at Delaware County. And then when it came down to it, I knew I didn't want to really stay there to get my associates because at this point, I felt like I'd already been wasting enough time. So I was like, I was ready to transfer before I got my associates. So I started looking around, and then Widener just made sense. And I ended up transferring in as a sophomore. And like, I decided to stay with chemical engineering, even though it was a rough decision, but I knew that I was super indecisive in general. And chemical engineering was like the only major that allowed me to pursue engineering and still be indecisive, because I just felt like there's enough out there for me to do where I won't be able to make a decision, if that makes sense.
I'll never forget, like, I think the first class we had together was actually organic. So
it wasn't Chemi Principles?
I took Chemi Principles, I think, over the summer.
So okay.
Because I was on co-op. So
that would have been
I think our first class together was actually organic too.
Whoa.
So like January, wow, isn't that crazy how time flies?
It's so weird. I do remember not knowing if you were a chemical engineer because I didn't know who you were. And I was like,
well, the class was so big and like
it was huge. So it was hard to tell because I was already overwhelmed coming in as a transfer student. So
but I think it all worked out though.
Oh no, it definitely did. I'm really glad I made the decisions I made.
Yeah. Do you think part of the decision is, so you said that you were kind of unsure. You said you were taking art classes at Delaware County. Why did you kind of like lose hope in chemical engineering after you dropped out of Drexel? Like, what were some of the thought processes behind that?
I think it goes back to like high school. Maybe I thought in high school you kind of get pushed where some teachers might think you belong, even though you might not think that's where you belong. And when you're 18 and you're making big decisions like that, you think maybe it's easy to blame yourself. Like maybe I made the wrong decision. So I thought engineering wasn't actually for me, but I think it turns out Drexel wasn't for me. So when I went to Delaware County and I was taking those classes, and I could tell the difference of being not interested in what I was learning versus being unattached at Drexel. So it was a different feeling. I could tell that the class, like I took journalism and I remember I took linear algebra. So I took one higher math course to like try and figure out it was a multitude of courses. And I finally, the more that I stayed at Delaware County and got to know different types of classes, I just realized that I enjoyed solving problems and I enjoy math and I do enjoy science. It was so
Yeah,
that was basically
I think what's crazy is I think this
Yeah.
goes across like a lot of like different like disciplines, but it's crazy to ask an 18-year-old what they want to do for the rest of their life.
Oh yeah,
And nowadays people are shoving down college everyone's throat. And I
and
think we're beginning to see that that's not the truth at all.
no, definitely not.
If you want to go, be it go to trade school or
Oh yeah, no, I think that is a great option. And I think because college was kind of shoved down my throat so much, I just didn't like it. It just didn't feel like it was for me, which
Wait, let me go back to real quick. Why did you take linear algebra? For those who don't know, linear algebra is like extremely high math. It goes above like basic engineering math principles. That's like a math major type of course.
It's not a fun class. Because I needed to take something that was challenging. And I knew that in my head. Like I needed to make sure that I wasn't just taking these art classes, that I I needed to make sure that I did something that semester that literally challenged me to think about what I wanted to do and to think about what I actually enjoy. Oh, I'm not saying it was a fun class by any means. It was impossible, but I did enjoy it. I just had to do it.
Well, you're hearing from her, ladies and gentlemen. Unless you're a math major, do not take linear algebra.
But yeah, don't.
Okay, so you get here to Widener, right?
Yeah.
But you kind of started the research program a little bit late, I would say, right?
Right.
You didn't pick up, because I know you do research, Dr. Saha. So why don't you go into a little bit about your research, because I know it also is your senior project now. So I don't know. Why don't you take us through how you got into research and then what it is.
So yeah, I didn't get into research until early in my junior year, because the unfortunate thing about transferring is you kind of have that buffer zone where everybody kind of has it in freshman year. You have it whatever year you transfer in. So sophomore year was kind of used as like getting to know Widener, and like I wasn't comfortable putting myself out there yet. But by the time junior year came along and, we had transport phenomena with Dr. Saha, and that class was the class that made me realize that I had the ability to do what chemical engineers do and all of that stuff. So I kind of just had that connection with transport and had that connection with Dr. Saha. So the second he said that he was looking for a research assistant, I just kind of jumped on it. I didn't even really think about what it was. I had general interest in what he was doing, but I was like, I'm gonna run with this feeling, and I'm gonna just go full force. So Dr. Saha had told us that he was looking for a research assistant, and I was like, hey, like I'm available. What you're doing sounds really cool, and I would love to be a part of it. And it was pretty simple. It was honestly, I wish it was a more fun story, but that's pretty much all it is. Because I was not planning on ever getting into research. It just so happened that I really enjoyed him as a teacher, and I was really starting to kind of find my groove, and I felt a lot more comfortable.
That's good. I think I say this a lot. Like sometimes just taking the first step, just like reaching out to professor, because I don't know, some there's a big misconception that professors are like not approachable. I feel like at least a majority of them, especially in the program, but a lot of them really are down to earth once you get to know them.
Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, getting to know Dr. Saha the way that I've gotten to know him, they're super down to earth. They're just
Dr. Saha is a goof. I know he's
a
goofball.
He is the funniest person. And you don't think so, because you just think, oh, they're just insanely smart and it's terrifying to talk to, which was the case at first, but it truly isn't. And I think
what do you guys do? Like, what's your research? Like, what do you do?
So him as a researcher in general, his whole research, everything he's done is like based around microporous and nanoporous materials. So the research that I specifically work with is generating microporous carbons from different precursors and using them to separate gases. So, you know, a lot of the gases that we try and separate are like ethylene and propylene from ethane and propane. So important gases in like the plastic and polymer industry that are normally done by distillation, which is super inefficient and takes a lot of energy. So what our goal is to synthesize these microporous carbons and then to use them in adsorption and use and dope them with certain things to use those abilities to separate certain gases out.
Gotcha. Okay. So let's go back. Let's try and break this down for some people. So
yeah,
you start with a microporous material.
So we start with a carbon material. So for example,
So
yeah,
okay, you start with a carbon material.
So you start with your carbon precursor, which like the one we use in senior project is lignin. So that is just a complex organic polymer that's found in like all plants. It's like deposited on plant cells. So it's actually biorenewable, which is another added environmental positive impact. And what you do is you, so with lignin, we hydrolyze it. So we react it with water first. And then we carbonize it. So when you carbonize something, you get it down to that carbon skeletal structure. So it's kind of bare bones. You can do with what you want with it. So we carbonize it. We use nitrogen to carbonize. And then what we do is we activate it with potassium hydroxide. So what that does is it creates like little empty spots in the carbon skeleton. So these are like kind of like our pore precursors.
It makes like pockets, right?
Yeah, it makes little pockets, like little deposits, and then it burns off, so it leaves the pockets. And then we use, one of the things we use is sulfur, and then we dope it with sodium thiosulfate. So the sulfur kind of creates, it gets attracted into the pores. So our pore spaces now have these sulfur deposits on them. And then the last step is using, we either use silver or we use copper, both metals work, to then react with the sulfur that's on the pores. And then the sulfur kind of gets replaced with either the silver or copper that we're doping it with.
And what's the purpose of the copper, the silver?
So those metal ions, they kind of give an affinity for certain parts or certain gases. So basically when we work with like alkane separation. So it actually creates like an affinity with the pi bond in the alkene so that it can go through and then it leaves the alkane out. So it's able to separate them, basically just with some pi bonding.
So essentially, so you create a carbon metal complex as your pores, right? And for those who don't know, what she's talking about is an alkene is just a double bond. So carbons that are involved in double bond structures in your gases will get attached to the porous material, right? And then your single bonds, so the carbons that have single bonds will pass through, right?
Yeah, right. So, yeah, basically.
Okay. That's awesome.
Yeah.
So what is then the senior project aspect of it? Is it just a continuation of it, or?
It's a continuation of the research that I've done over the past year. So we're going to stick with lignin. So I've worked with other carbon precursors, but lignin is just that special. It's also biorenewable. So it's just an even more positive impact. It's not as efficient as other ones that I've worked with, but for senior project, it's definitely doing well. And then we're going to focus on doping it. So I said that you could either dope with silver or copper. So we're going to stick with silver doping because copper is actually really impossible to work with. Because we have to work with copper 1, and for those that don't know, copper 2 is the more stable copper. So trying to work with copper 1 without it oxidizing to copper 2 is like quite nearly impossible unless you're doing it super quick. So we are going to stick with silver because it's much easier to work with. And we're going to try and separate propylene from propane.
Oh, wow. So, okay, I got you. So, so the current state of the project is using your force material with silver. Your carbon force material with silver, and then trying to separate propylene from propane. Is that
correct? Yep.
Now, are these in gas form though? Oh yeah.
Yep. Gas separation. Yep. We work with just gas separation because we use adsorption.
Is there a reason why you want to separate propylene from propane? Like, there is a.
So propylene is what you usually want. Like, that's your desired product. I mean, you can use propane for a lot of things as well, but for our goal is to make the polymer plastic industry a little bit more efficient. So you would be using propylene for those high density plastics and ethylene as well. So our goal is mainly to just kind of focus on that. But because when you so those gases, when you find them, they're always almost clumped together. When you find those, they're always in a mixture of some sort when you naturally find them. So they always have to go through some separation technique. But using the distillation processes that they have, they're only like 30% efficient. So they're really not that good. But it's the only real way to separate them as of right now.
Wow. Okay. So how is it? So when you find them in nature, you're saying it's not efficient to separate them using distillation? Propylene,
right? But just like any refinery. Every refinery uses distillation, but they require so much energy, and they're not always that efficient.
So for those just that don't really understand, so distillation column essentially will separate substances based on their boiling point and volatility, right? So if I don't know which one has a higher boiling point. Propane or
I'd probably say propylene.
Yeah. So what you would do is you would try and boil off the propane because there's a lower boiling point, and then you would just be left with propylene. But their senior project is going to try and find a more efficient and more sustainable method using this green carbon method and separating it by absorption versus boiling points. Correct?
Right.
That's really cool. It's really cool you guys are doing that.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Wow. How did Saha get it? Do you know why Dr. Saha decided to go with these projects, or?
That's a good question. I think he's just always had this thing for nanoporous materials. I'll have to ask him as to why, but almost all of his projects have been nanoporous or microporous related.
This is really green chemistry. I'm really proud of you guys.
It is.
It's really sustainable. We love to hear that. Green initiatives.
I'm actually also getting my minor in environmental engineering. So I'm just because I know that I want to work in the oil and gas industry most likely. So, it's almost inevitable as an option as a chemical engineer. So I figured do my due diligence and do it as green as possible.
We love to hear that.
We love it. Oh, yeah.
So actually moving on, you said you want to work in the oil and gas industry. What specifically? Where do you see yourself after you graduate?
So, after I graduate, I am going to stay on and get my master's and defend a thesis in microporous materials. So I'm gonna do a thesis track. So I'm partially terrified, but partially excited. So
you're gonna be fine. Don't worry.
Thanks, Aiden. But obviously, when I graduate, I do want to go into the working field and do it at the same time as getting my master's. So right now, I'm also an intern at an engineering firm, and one of the things that I do is I design gas mains and transmission lines and regulator stations. And it is something I enjoy doing, and it's something I could see myself continuing to do. But it's hard for me to know. Again, I'm super indecisive, which is just kind of circling back to why I chose chemical engineering to begin with. But I do really enjoy designing those transmission lines and regulator stations, and as well as what I work with Saha. So I'm hoping by the time I'm done with my master's, I know a little bit more about what I want to do.
Mm-hmm.
But
part of the journey, I think, for a lot of people is finding out what you don't like to do. It's just as important what you do like to do.
Yeah.
So if you find something you don't like to do it, well, at least you know for the future. Then
Right.
For sure. But that's really cool that you want to go get your master's degree. You see, you want to get it in nanoporous material?
So I'll get my master's in chemical engineering, but my thesis will most likely be something related to microporous carbons.
Okay. And does your thesis have anything to do with like how your adaptability to the job market? Will jobs care what your thesis is about necessarily, or?
I'm not sure. I mean, I know most theses can end up in publication. So in that aspect, I'm sure it'd be beneficial. But technically, I would assume in my head that it's kind of similar to when you get concentrations in something.
Okay.
So what the thesis does is it takes some of the classes away and replaces it with lab work. So it's obviously more beneficial to those who want to get into research and do research when they're graduating. But I don't see myself in a research lab forever.
Mm-hmm.
I just enjoy what I research.
Yeah, I mean, I see that. Research isn't for everybody. I mean, it's good to have under your belt. But some people just want to go into industry. So I mean,
right. Yeah.
Yeah. What are some of your favorite Widener moments?
Ooh. I don't know. I mean, I've made really, really good friends at Widener, and that as a whole is one of my favorite moments because I mean, I always thought that college wasn't going to be where I met friends for life because I thought I'd already had them, which I do, but I met some of the greatest people. I mean, I think our class is one of the greatest classes. I mean, I just definitely feel super close with everybody, and that dynamic is just super special. So that and getting involved in AIChE, that had a big part to do with how I look back at Widener. I did a lot of stuff for them, and organizing events and getting to meet people was definitely super special. So
I can definitely attest to that as well, because as you moved move through the engineering program, and I'm also in chemistry, but I mean a lot of us, we're all in same classes. We're literally in every single class together, all the chemistry are. And it's really interesting to see how we moved through our entire 4 years here, right? So at least freshman, you weren't here freshman year, but freshman year you're just in with everyone, right? You're with all the engineers. But then as you move up and as you get more specific, you're around the same people every day. I mean, even though we're virtual, we're in probably what, six or seven classes, and you just build this weird bond. Weird in a good way. Weird and good.
Oh no, I agree.
Weird in a good way, and I have some of my favorite memories interacting with professors and faculty, and just being a goof.
Right.
And
yeah.
The faculties are also goof too, because we're all serious, but we're goofballs at the same time.
Right. It's tons of fun.
No, that's really cool. And what's interesting too, props to you and John Mason, because freshman, sophomore year AIChE wasn't really a thing.
I've heard.
Yeah. So John was the one who which I want to get him on the podcast, but
yeah, that'd be good.
Yeah, he basically revived it.
Right. If it wasn't for him and him fighting last year, I don't really think it would have continued. Yeah. So
for those who don't know, AIChE, it just stands for the American Institute of Chemical Engineers. It's just the local chemical engineering chapter club here at Widener University. Marisa's the president, right?
Yeah.
Who on Thursday?
Oh yeah, trivia night. Can't wait.
Oh.
Hopefully you take another prize.
Yep. For those who don't know, I won. Go figure. Because I always win.
Complained the whole time about how hard it was, but ended up winning.
Okay, because out of the 50 questions, I think 15 of them were about anime. So.
That's what happens when I leave it to Joel to make. And he's also making this one, so be prepared.
Oh man. All right. Any advice you give to like high school students who are interested in pursuing a chemical engineering degree or?
Oh, I think I have tons. Definitely do it because you want to. Don't ever do anything because somebody is telling you it's what you have to do. That mindset just never gets you anywhere. And just be open. Be open to the opportunities that you can surround yourself with, and be open to the education opportunities around you. I mean, chemical engineering is just one of those special majors where you learn a lot, and you don't necessarily maybe use all that you learn, but being open to it and taking it all so seriously just really benefits you in the end.
I think Marisa can attest to this. Like, also don't be discouraged by like where you are at the beginning, right? So like,
right,
if you're not feeling at one institution, maybe it's another institution, maybe it's a faculty, like
it could be anything. Yeah. And not feeling discouraged and not giving up, and just allowing, I mean, everybody grows and everybody learns at different rates. So it's, don't, be discouraged when you think you're going at too slow of a pace, because, believe it or not, maybe you're not. So it's definitely what I would say.
Awesome. Well, Marisa, I want to thank you for joining in on the podcast today.
Oh, thank you for having me, Aiden. I was super thrilled when you asked.
Well, all my 15 subscribers will watch this.
I mean, after having me, it might boost it up. So don't worry.
After having Marisa on, my podcast is going to blow up.
Yes, it is.
But but seriously, thank you. I know I appreciate it. Hopefully we can do this again.
Oh, I would love that.
We'll do it again. Maybe we'll do a check-in. A couple months after the senior project, we can get some insight. We hear some feedback.
Oh, that's a super good idea. I think this podcast thing is really going to fly off for you, Aiden.
Oh,
better be prepared.
Thank you. Well, everyone, I want to thank you again for joining on episode 5, and we'll see you next time. Then you're left in the dust, unless I stuck by you. You're a sunflower. I think your love will be too much, or you'll be left in the